Right. A very good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Chandrasekhar. I'll be dealing with the neurobiology course, and today I'll be discussing about few important topics of CO1 as well as CO2. Right. So we'll start with the fundamentals of neurobiology. Right. So neurobiology is a branch of biology that focuses on the structure as well as the function of the nervous system. So neurobiology is dealing with brain as well as spinal cord as well as the peripheral nervous system. Brain and spinal cord constitute the central nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system includes your cranial nerves and spinal nerves, all coming out from brain as well as spinal cord are called as peripheral nervous system. So along with the dealing with brain, spinal cord and peripheral nerves and studying those, we also we also discuss about the block of neurons to complex neural network as well as the behavioral pattern of beings also we are going to study in the neurobiology. Right. So please have a look at the picture. What you see here is the brain and followed by spinal cord. These two constitute the central nervous system, and the nerves that are arriving from the brain are called as cranial nerves, and the nerves which are coming from the spinal cord are called as spinal nerves. Right. So if you have a look at that picture here, so we have the central nervous system components here. That is a brain hemispheres, including your diencephalon, cerebellum, brainstem, spinal cord. Everything constitute the central nervous system. And here you have the afferent and efferent neurons. So afferent neurons are those which transmit the signal from the sensory organs to the brain. They are also called as sensory neuron. And the second efferent neurons are those which transmit the signal from the brain to the motor parts. That's why they are called as motor neurons. So if you have a look at this picture carefully, so whenever an external stimuli comes, like a light or an object, whenever it is visualized or heard by eyes and ears, that signal will be passed on to the brain through the sensory neurons. Sensory neurons helps in transmitting the signal from the sensory organ to the brain. Whereas in the case of efferent neuron, the signal from the brain will be passed downstream with the help of motor neurons to have a specific action. Like if you take a look at these actions, it can be a smooth muscle contraction or an involuntary action like a cardiac muscle contraction, or a release or secretion by some glands. All these are the efferent actions done based on the signal that is coming from the brain. Right. So this is about overview of our nervous system. Then we'll have a look at the components of neurons. Okay. We'll have a look at the structure of neuron and what are the parts of the neuron. So neuron basically have a cell body which has a nuclei, cytoplasm, everything inside in the cell body, followed by a long axon. So axon helpful in transmitting the neuronal signal from cell body through axon through the terminal to the next neuron. Then the cell body will have dendrites. It's a reticulated structure which helps in receiving the signal from a presynaptic neuron, and a myelinated sheath which is made up of fatty acid wound around the axon, which acts as an insulating material so that the no signal which is passing through the neuron will be lost. And the last part is the axon terminal button, so which act as a presynaptic neuron where the synaptic vesicles will be released into the synapse, and then the neurotransmitters will move through the synapse, and then it will bind to the receptors present inside the postsynaptic neuron. So have a look at this picture here. So these are the component parts which I discussed just now. This one is the cell body, and which has a definite nuclei and cytoplasm inside, and these are the dendrites, and cell body is also called as a soma, and this is the nuclei, and here you have the myelinated sheath wound around the axon. This is the axon, and this is the myelinated sheath, which is made up of fatty acid, which helps in preventing the loss of signal moving outside the neuron. So signal has to pass from inside the neuron. Let's say this is the first neuron and we have the second neuron here. Signal has to pass in this direction, from here to here, from soma to the axon terminal. So these are the axon terminal called button terminals. These act as a presynaptic clefts where they are going to release into the synapse, and then through the synapse it will neurotransmitters will bind on to the postsynaptic neuron. Next, a few important terminologies. Since it's a basic session, we need to discuss before we further move on to other sessions. Convergence. Convergence means the number of inputs, that means signal from different neurons merges into a single neuron. That's a convergence. That means input from several neurons comes to a single neuron. Divergence means it's a reverse of convergence, where signal from multiple neurons, a number of target innervated by only one neuron, right? So next, action potential. Action potential is a change of potential across the neuronal cell membrane so that the signal passes through the neuron. Synaptic transmission, synaptic chemical synapse and electrical synapse, these are also very important term. Synaptic transmission means transmission of signal between two neurons through a space, a tiny, very tiny space called synapse. And chemical synapse means between two neurons there is a physical space, and then neurotransmitters are released into this space, and then these neurotransmitters will bind to the postsynaptic neurons, and then the signal will transmit. Whereas in case of electrical synapse, there is a very minute gap in between the two neurons, almost no gap in between these two neurons, and there is a direct contact between the first neuron and the second neuron. So the electrical impulse can directly pass through the connection from one neuron to the another neuron. Whereas in earlier case, chemical synapse, there is a gap between one neuron and the other neuron. We will discuss more about a synapse in coming sessions. Right. So now let me discuss about types of neurons. So we can classify neurons based on the direction of communication. As I discussed in our earlier class, afferent neurons are those which collect the information, external stimuli with the help of a sensory organs like eyes, ears, nose. All these sensory organs, tongue, they collect the information and then they send the information to the brain. The neurons which helps in transfer of signal from the sensory organ to the brain are called as afferent neurons, also called as sensory neurons, because they are binding to the sensory organs. They are also called as sensory neurons. So the second category of neurons which helps in communication are called as efferent neurons. So efferent neurons are those the nerve cell that carry information away from the brain or spinal cord. That means the nerves signaling will be from the central nervous system to the effector organs, like hands and limbs will get the signals from the brain through these efferent neurons. So whenever you want to do a task, if I want to raise my hand, my brain will send a signal from with the help of efferent neurons to my hand so that I can take an action. Or if my heart has to contract autonomously, so the autonomous nervous system will helps in contraction of cardiac muscle, or even the other muscle contraction also is directed by the efferent neurons. So interneurons particular only in local aspects of the circuit. It's a transfer of signal from one region to the another region is done with the help of interneuron. So these are the three basic categories of neurons.